Sorry I'm late. What is up out there in YouTube land? It's the Snowman, and today I've got a new toy to review. Now, yeah, these came out last August, so it's a year late. Sue me. Now, I will say I had zero intentions of buying one of these when they first came out. I have been on team no Traxxas for some time now, with their chosen business practices and proprietariness, or proprietarity. Is that a word? Proprietariness of their electronics. But after seeing these things all over the interwebs for the past year or so, I had to try one. Now, Traxxas, you've got a chance here. Don't disappoint me. Now, there's already a dozen videos out there, far better than anything I can make, that go over all of the specs on these trucks. So let's just get right into the course and see how this thing does. Now, I don't have a frame of reference to compare this truck to a standard TRX4M because, well, I don't have one. And don't really plan to ever have one. Primarily because, well, to be honest, I've got zero interest in Land Rovers in general, and I'm not really a fan of the four-door Broncos. When it comes to the new Broncos, I vastly prefer two doors. Four doors are done. So, I'm basically going to be reviewing this thing based on its own merits and downfalls. So, right off the bat, I can tell you the motor seems like it's lacking a lot in power. I'm having to give it a lot of throttle just to make it do anything now. I don't know really if there's any way to kind of adjust the settings in these transmitters, or if it's kind of one of those, you know, it is what it is kind of deals. So far, the steering response seems to be pretty good. Seems to point the front tires exactly where you're telling it to. I think the traction on these tires could definitely be better, at least for this terrain, but overall they don't seem too bad for a stock tire. These plastic wheels, I definitely think this thing's going to need some weight down low, but also I am noticing right off the bat, just kind of in terms of the way it's handling, being that it's a high trail and has that lift kit in it, does seem to be hurting the center of gravity quite a lot. And that seems to be a pretty common result. Also, doesn't seem like the front body clip wants to. There we go. I think I got it that time. So now that line up there on that shelf is a pretty tricky one for these larger scale rigs. Just in terms of their larger size, really inhibits their turning radius and the amount of space they need to make that turn. You can definitely tell there's some adjustments that'll need to be made and some upgrades that I want to do. But, I mean, to be completely honest, I bought this thing just to have a cool looking trail truck, and it definitely fits that bill. So I don't really care so much about performance anymore with these mini rigs. I just like playing with them and building them. And honestly, I came into this with pretty low expectations, and as far as what I'm seeing here so far, I mean, they've been met, and in terms of looks, I would say exceeded. I think eventually I probably will go ahead and black base the inside of that body, just so the headlights don't shine through it so much. Even though, honestly, the little bit I've run this thing so far, I typically just leave the lights unplugged. But you can definitely see where there would be some tire clearance issues if you took the lift kit out of this thing, which I actually do plan to do, but I also don't plan to run these tires long term. Now I am pretty excited to see how this thing does outside on some real terrain. That won't be in this video, but I do definitely want to take this thing. Really, I'd like to take it over to my buddy Freddie's house. He's got some pretty cool trails over there for these things along the creek on the edge of his property. So I mean, overall the throttle control is really not bad. It seems to be situations like this right here that it has a hard time crawling. Now Traxxas does sell gear sets for these, so you can re-gear the transmissions. And I do have the crawl gear set that I do plan on putting in, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Now right there, that front bumper is sticking out there the way it does hinder you a little bit. Same with the rear bumper. You don't have the best approach and departure angles here, but overall it's not bad. Didn't really expect any better than that. And now the last thing I want to test before we head back to the bench is this hill right here, which I don't have a name for, but I feel like this hill needs a name because as of right now I've never had a truck make it up it. I've had some come close. You really got to pick your line right because there's a lot of divots in it. Alright, so fresh out of the box, not super impressed with it honestly. I feel like obviously being a hard body plus the super high center of gravity from being lifted really does act as a detriment to this truck. I think overall it's got a lot of great potential. I mean, just hitting on the high spots, the clipless body system on these TRX4Ms is awesome. I really wish Axial would do something similar with the SCX24s. I mean, the Velcro that they're using on the newer trucks, which I really wish they would have used on the new version of the C10s, is way better than the body clips for sure, but being able to just pop two, little finger clips and pull the whole body right completely off is an awesome feature. Works really well, holds the bodies nice and solid. They don't move around, they don't wiggle, they don't rattle or anything like that. As I said, I don't really care for the proprietary nature of Traxxas electronics, but with what I'm planning on doing with this truck, I don't think I'm going to swap any of that out. I'm just going to leave it. I'll just use the charger that was supplied with the truck to charge the battery, since I can't use my ProTech charger, but whatever. I mean, as far as detail goes, this thing looks awesome. You've got separately molded wipers, mirrors, door handles. Time will tell how long the mirrors hold up. They're pretty thin and flimsy. I also don't really care for the fact that all of those accessories were heat swaged onto the body when they were installed. So that means if you wanted to pop all that stuff off and paint this body, number one, not only are you going to lose all the decals when you do so, you're also going to have to sand or scrape off all those little heat swaged pins and then end up gluing the hardware back on. I love this red. It's a great looking color. Like I said out on the course, I think it really needs to be black based on the inside to stop the light from shining through, but really that's minor. And if you don't run it with the lights on, it's not a problem at all. But I do really wish Traxxas offered an unpainted body kit for these so that you can change the colors. Because I do have some pretty big plans as far as potentially 3D printing parts for these. So, don't necessarily know how much I'm going to do with this truck. I may end up buying a second one to build. So keep an eye out for that. I may even get the F-150 because that blue one looks amazing. But we'll see. For now, this truck needs some new parts. And I've got some new parts. So for starters, I've got the Traxxas crawl ratio gears that we talked about. They are plastic, which is kind of but I mean, they're cheap. It is what it is. Now these are a 40.3 to 1 reduction ratio. I don't know what's in it now. I don't have a clue. I don't really care to look up the specs, but these should make it slower and hopefully help improve the low power problem that we have when climbing. The steering on this thing, honestly, I'm actually pretty pleased with. I really like the way the servo is mounted to the axles on these. It doesn't interfere with the frame at all. It allows for a lot of flex in that front end without it hitting the frame, unlike SCX24s. But we're going to go ahead and just upgrade that anyways and see how this little EcoPower does. Now, I run the EcoPower 827s in all of my SCX24s, and for $14 servo, they're all holding up pretty well. So, we're going to see if this provides any improvement at all, or if it's just a waste of a few bucks. Now, as far as actual power, the motor that comes in this truck is a 180 size, 87 turn Titan reverse rotation motor. Seems like it should have plenty of power. I don't know how much of the crawling and throttle response issue I had was actually a lack of motor power, or how much of it was a lack of gearing, or just something in the way the transmitter and ESC are set up that I don't know how to adjust. But we're going to go ahead and try out the Holmes Hobbies Torque Master Mini 180 size 87 turn motor made specifically for these trucks. Now, I am running a Holmes motor in my UTB 18 build that hasn't been on the channel yet, but will eventually. And now the biggest thing with this truck is we've got to get some weight down low and drop that center of gravity. Now, the easiest way to lower these trucks is actually just to put regular TRX4M shock mounts on them to pick those shock locations back up to where they are in the unlifted version. I don't have any of those shock mounts. I am probably going to get some eventually. So for now, we're just going to add some weight. So I've got some Trio brass diff covers. We'll throw those on and see what they do. These are 15.8 grams a piece. And then I've got some SSD aluminum wheels with brass lock rings. I've got some SSD wheels. I don't think they're actually on anything right now. I do have them. Well, I guess I don't have them mounted up to my MTRs. I have them mounted up to something. I just don't remember what. But anyway, they used to be on my Jeep. I like them. They've got a decent weight to them. They go together well. They mount up really well. I wanted to stick with the look of the wheels that came on this truck, but add some weight. So I think these are just the ticket. So for now, we're just going to run these Mickey Thompsons that come on it. But eventually, I am actually going to try out some of these tires that I've actually already tried out a little bit. These are the new LGRP Black Label 57 millimeters. So they've got a pretty cool tread pattern and there we go. I really like LGRP tires. The Swamp Kings are one of my all-time favorite tires. So we'll see how those do later on down the road. Probably not in this video. Alright, so I've got the upgrades installed. Now, the brass diff covers and the brass lock rings in the wheels definitely make a noticeable difference in the weight. I haven't actually thrown it on the scales because I don't really care to actually check it. It's not that important. Now, just a quick note about this EcoPower 640T servo. You're going to want to use the servo horn that comes with the stock Traxxas servo, because the aluminum one that comes with the EcoPower won't quite clear the upper link mounts in there with the way this servo is mounted. Also, you're going to have to do a little bit of clearancing to that stock servo mount, because the EcoPower is a little bit wider here than what the stock one is. Now, as far as whether or not it's actually an upgrade in terms of power and ability, we'll see. Certainly, though, it's going to be an upgrade just in the nature of that it's not an entirely plastic servo like the stock one was. But range of motion and turning speed and everything seems to be right on par with what the stock one was. We got the Holmes 180 size 87 turn Torque Master motor in there. That fits beautifully. It is tight right here on this part of the front shock mounts. So if you get one of these, you may end up having to file just a little bit of the solder off of those joints just to make it fit perfect. But I didn't have to do that. Now, contrary to my initial plan, I actually did end up mounting the LGRP Black Label tires. And the reason for that is the stock tires that come on these high trails, these Mickey Thompsons, they're actually a little bit bigger than a 1.0 size, so they would not mount on these wheels. Now, in my experience, SSD wheels are actually a little bit on the smaller side, but not enough that it's mattered on any other wheel I've ever tried to mount on them. But these LGRPs mounted up perfect. They fit great. They look awesome on the truck. So, pretty good upgrade there. I think these are going to perform way better than those stock tires. They seem to be a softer compound for sure, plus with the extra weight from aluminum wheels with brass lock rings, should be a major net positive. Now just slapping the body back on here, you can see I also lowered it. Now the way I ended up lowering this truck, I actually went ahead and I just took the springs right out of the shocks. I also pulled out the little bottom spring retainer cups. Now, I'm not sure I'd recommend doing it this way. These shocks do leak a little bit of oil, and when the truck's been sitting flat on its wheels for a little while, the shocks kind of stick. I mean, they break free nice and easy, but keep that in mind. Now, you can lower these high trails by using the regular TRX4M shock mounts, and Pro Noob RC actually has a great video on that on his channel where he did that with his F-150. However, with these pickups you have to be careful because of that drop box in the bed. You actually don't have enough clearance for the stock rear shock mounts without trimming the bed floor. So what he actually ended up doing was putting the stock or regular TRX4M shock mounts up front, but then I believe modifying his front shock mounts to work in the rear, but slid forward. So you actually end up with the same ride height all the way across with a nice level frame, but you also get a little bit more flex out of the rear, and you can keep your springs on your shocks. Now I may still end up doing that in the future, but for now, I think this is good enough just to get that center of gravity a little bit lower and make this thing handle a little bit better on the course. So let's take it out there and see how it does. Now I don't really expect to see any major differences. We still got the same amount of flex because the shocks are still the same lengths, but I think right there you can definitely see the difference that adding that weight from the brass diff covers and the heavier wheels makes. Really helps keep the truck planted, gets that center of gravity down low, as well as lowering it and putting the body down lower. Really helps aid in keeping the tires planted. Now also, something that you really probably can't see in the video, but that I can definitely feel in the controller, I've got much better throttle response, and I've much easier time crawling with it without having to give it a lot of throttle just to get it to move. I don't know how much of that is the crawl gears and how much of that is that Torque Master motor, but certainly the two of them combined is making a major difference in the power of this thing. And now these tires, compared to the ones that come stock on this truck, are a shorter height. These are a 57 millimeter versus about 61 or 62 millimeters for those Mickey Thompsons. So effectively we've got less ground clearance to our axles, but I think the compound on these tires is certainly going to actually aid the traction more than what that smaller size is going to be a detriment. Now one thing I can tell you with the little bit I've been running this truck is that massive differential in these things from having a ring and pinion rather than a worm drive like say the SCX24. You do end up catching that differential on things quite a bit more than what you seem to with the axials. Now the part I'm really curious about, have we actually lowered the center of gravity enough that this truck can make it across this gap? Still not quite. So that stretch there is super difficult because of how off camber you are, how much flex you need to be able to get the truck over it. And with a larger size truck like these 1/18 scale TRX4Ms, you don't have a whole lot of room to maneuver to really be able to set yourself up to make it across there. But I can tell you definitely, by a long shot, throttle control and the ability to crawl has been drastically improved with these mods. So I would definitely say that that motor upgrade, which is super cheap, and the crawl gears are must-haves for these trucks. Yeah, there's no way this thing would have done that before. And so just as testing it with stock, last thing we're going to try is going up this ramp over here. I really think with the right set of tires on this thing, it would actually do this. Maybe just a little bit more nose bias and an overdrive, because the hardest thing about this climb is this divot right here. You drop your tires into here or here, and you've pretty much got a vertical wall you've got to try to get up over. That realistically is about half the height of most of your tires at this scale. Now there are certainly some things I could do as far as altering the terrain there to kind of cheat this line and make it a little bit easier, but then that's taking all the fun out of it. Alright, there you have it. That is the Traxxas TRX4M High Trail Edition, or now Low Trail Edition, and what I consider to be 5 or 6 must-have upgrades. Definitely brass diff covers, heavier wheels, throw on a different set of tires for a little bit better grip, throw in that set of crawl gears from Traxxas. They're only a few bucks, super easy to install, makes this thing a whole nother animal. Overall, pretty impressed with it. Honestly, for the price point, I think I'd rather spend an extra 20 bucks or so on it total and get full bearings everywhere like the SCX24, you know, and maybe even just metal differential gears at the very least. But overall, super solid truck, super impressed with it. And if you want to lower your High Trail Edition, go ahead and check out Pro Noob RC's video. I'll give him a free shout out here, and I'll link that video down in the description. At first, that's the way I was gonna go. He's actually the first one I saw do that, but I actually kind of like the whole no springs setup. It's actually a setup I run in quite a few of my SCX24s. So far, I've been really happy with them in all of those, so I think I'll run this for a while as it is. See how long it takes for these shocks to just completely lose the oil out of them, because they are definitely leaking. The rear ones especially were pretty wet when I went to take it all apart, but I think possibly in the near future, I'll get a set of aluminum oil-filled shocks for it and see if those are any better quality as far as the seals in them. But for now, this has been the Traxxas TRX4M High Trail K10 and Adventure 207. See you next time.